What power as a senator would you have to change gun laws?
Well, I'd be one vote out of 100, but putting libertarian Carla Howell in the U.S. Senate is like putting a designated driver in a room full of drunks. But seriously, what's going to happen if libertarian, small government Carla Howell defeats the 38-year incumbent, big government, gun-grabbing icon of the U.S. Senate, Ted Kennedy? If I were to be elected, we would ring in the era of small government. Gun owners would have a whole new podium. Small government would have a real voice in this country, and we would be fast on our way to electing all the representatives we need to get a majority and to turn this around and return us to small government.
Start building momentum.
Absolutely.
Okay. On a different topic, are guns perceived differently in urban and suburban areas versus rural areas? And if so, how is that a factor in the state of Massachusetts?
Well, certainly the states that have more rural residents, where everybody owns a gun and everybody hunts or has a gun in the house, it's normal to them to have guns, and they're all well trained and they know how to behave around a gun and how to keep themselves safe. When you have smaller states with a high relative urban population, such as Massachusetts, you have more people who don't understand this, except for the people in the very inner city, where they certainly do, where they do need a right to keep and bear arms because their neighborhood is very unsafe in a lot of cases. So those folks appreciate the right to keep and bear arms. A lot of rural folks do. And of course, there's a lot of people in the suburbs and living in the city who are members of gun clubs who do enjoy their sports, but they're a minority in this state. So there's a lot of people who just don't have any exposure to guns in Massachusetts relative to Vermont or New Hampshire, and they don't understand them.
Do you think that the lack of exposure accounts for a lot of the fear that's out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Continue, I'm sorry.
Well, I think that, you know, if a person's not exposed to guns and doesn't want to use a gun or get involved, well, they shouldn't. You know, the important thing is that they have the right to, because they may someday find themselves in a situation where maybe a woman has gotten into a conflict with an ex-boyfriend or husband, and she is afraid. She's being stalked or she's being threatened. Now suddenly this woman who may have been anti-gun all her life now understands on a very personal level what it means to need self-defense.
Sure, sure. How can guns be kept out of the hands of criminals, children, and the untrained without infringing upon the rights of the average law-abiding gun owner?
The only way you can keep guns out of every hand, out of the hands of anyone who could potentially be dangerous, is to form a complete totalitarian state, police state, where every move of every citizen is guarded and policed by the government. It is impossible to keep guns out of the hands of criminals, unfortunately. If we remove things like the drug prohibition that encourage criminal behavior, then we reduce the incentive and we reduce the incidence of violent crime. And certainly we should prosecute vigorously those who do commit violent crimes and provide that deterrence. But ultimately, what we need to do is repeal the anti-gun laws, because all they do is disarm the innocent. Show criminals that because we respect the Second Amendment and because we obey it, anyone can be armed. And that means a criminal who might follow you to your ATM machine or break into your house or rape a woman on the street has reason to pause. And criminals are deterred by the right to keep and bear arms. So it's important that we maintain the Second Amendment, that we restore the Second Amendment, and that we remove these other incentives for violence.
Okay. Is gun education taught in the schools along the lines of sex education? Is that a viable solution to the serious lack of knowledge that children have about guns?
Well, I hate to go that route, because if you try to use the schools to impose something, a particular value of yours, that means your opposition's going to do it. You know, I mean, if gun owners succeed in getting training then the anti-gun people are going to succeed, as they have, in hiring a lot of teachers who are anti-gun and creating a lot of hysteria against guns. So it can work against you.
Sure.
And the schools then become a battleground for values, training. And I think it's best to keep schools locally controlled, and keep the job of the schools to the lowest common denominators, things like reading, writing, math, so that you don't get into these other kinds of values training or lifestyle issues, which just provoke more school wars.
Yes, more controversy.
Right, but certainly gun training and encouraging youth sports and encouraging people everywhere to, if you don't want to use a gun or try a gun, at least visit a sportsman's club sometime and meet the folks. Because
yeah.
I think a lot of people who are anti-gun, who call themselves liberal, just they don't realize how many people they know own guns, because a lot of people don't talk about it. So they all know gun owners because they're everywhere. But they perceive that there's some other people from some other culture than their own. And I think if they just go and meet some of these folks, they'll see that they're just like the people I work with, or the people my kids go to school with, or, you know, just ordinary folks.
Sure.
So I think that might help.
So there's a lack of exposure.
Yeah.
Given the lack of exposure, is there a place for education?
Well, I think the NRA is training, the sportsmen's clubs that offer training, the individual instructors, all the means of offering training, I applaud and encourage in the voluntary free market. I think it's a very good thing to do. I think television shows like this, anything that educates people about guns is a good thing.
Okay. Is it the place of government to promote and encourage compassion? And if not, should it be promoted, and by whom?
No, I don't think it's the job of government to promote passion. I think...
Or compassion.
Compassion.
Yeah.
I think people like Ted Kennedy have pretended to be promoting compassion when they say we want to expand this program for the poor, or for the children, or for the elderly, or for the sick. It is appealing to our compassion, our empathy for these people, and it's assuming then that government has a role to encourage compassion, to encourage giving. But in fact, when government gets involved in these areas, it makes things worse. Mm-hmm. So the very people these big government programs are supposed to help are getting hurt by them. The compassionate choice is small government. So you stop doing the damage to these people. Now, most people have natural compassion, and we all promote empathy and compassion and caring for others in our families and our extended families and our neighborhoods and so forth. We don't need the government to do that, particularly when the government comes in and actually makes all these things worse.
Has it happened on more of a personal level?
Absolutely, because when we give voluntarily through charities, for example, as opposed through a big government welfare bureaucracy, first of all, our money goes directly to the people who really need it, and we can develop a relationship with them where we know who they are, we can see the benefit of our giving, we can get gratification from that, they appreciate it, they know who's giving it to them, and we can be there to ensure that that money is being used well, to actually give them a hand up instead of a handout. When government assumes these roles, then what you have is big, huge, wasteful bureaucracies that are very impersonal and that simply institutionalize poverty and don't give anybody a chance, except on rare occasions, to really pull themselves out of it. But instead it encourages dependency, and that's bad. That hurts people.
Yeah. I guess what I'm thinking about in terms of compassion is more, mostly children, but also adults. How can we learn to be more respectful, tolerant, and accepting of each other, and welcoming of each other, which, in turn, I'm hoping would help to prevent things like Columbine and just interpersonal conflicts. The better we can deal with conflicts between us, between children, between adults, between children and adults. Is there a place for that to be promoted in our society, or what are your thoughts?
Yes, but
on
not through government. Obviously you and I and people want to see these things, but it would be arrogant of me to say as a politician that I know how to solve these problems. I don't. They're very broad and complicated issues that you're raising, and it's really up to each parent and each teacher and each school to properly educate kids, teach them good values, show them love and respect, and teach them to respect others. That's something that everybody throughout society has to do. And when government gets involved and pretends, as Ted Kennedy has, that we can assume this responsibility by creating big government programs and then have it turn out that they actually make things worse, that's very counter to our goals. That's damaging. We need to remove these big government programs and return these responsibilities to the individual, to the parents, to the teachers in the schools.
Okay. Is it possible for people on all sides of this issue to find common ground and work together toward a common goal of deterring and reducing crime and violence?
Well, I think it's the same issue. I think we're all doing that through our churches, through our schools, through our families. It's a goal that is natural to human beings. We all have that goal. And I don't think we need government to tell people to do that. I mean,
Sure.
churches formed a long time ago to address a lot of these values issues, and parents have been doing this since the beginning of time.
Mm-hmm.
So all we need to do is get government out of the way and allow these natural families, organizations, bonds, institutions in the private sector to do that job.
Okay. In closing, what would you like to say to the people you seek to represent on the topic of guns, crime, and violence? Any final thoughts on that?
If you'd like to see small government, if you think taxes are too high and government's too big, if you're tired of anti-gun laws that harass the sportsmen, disarm the innocent, and encourage the criminals to prey upon those innocent, vote Carla Howell. I am 100% pro-gun. I will repeal the anti-gun laws, and I will work day in and day out to make government small. If that's what you want, please vote Carla Howell. If you want big government, vote Ted Kennedy. If you want small government, vote Carla Howell. And please visit our website at carlahowell.org.
Great. In fact, we're going to put that up at the end of the program. Thank you for coming on, Carla.
My pleasure.
We're just going to let the credits roll. Yeah, thank you.